Love and happiness. But wait a minute, something's going wrong. Someone's on the phone, 3 o'clock in the morning, yeah, talking about how she can make it right, yeah. Happiness is when you really feel good about somebody. There's nothing wrong.
Be able to fellowship with one another, be able to get along, love one another, and agree that we're going to disagree on some things and still show love. That's what's so important about families showing love. And I never will forget my mom and dad, because we were taught how to love, taught how to treat people right, taught how to sometimes cuss people out. We were taught that way too. So we still, after we got through, we were delivered, because we have to set an example for our young people that's coming along now, and let them know how we were raised and taught in the right direction. Sometimes we all kind of stray off a little bit, but we know who's in control and who we belong to. And I wouldn't be ungrateful for nothing in the world. And I know I've been called silly, low down, all this, but I do know where we came from. I do know we had good parents. I do know that, because right here now, we showing love to one another, because we do love one another through the grace of God. He's bringing us through, and I truly praise God for this time.
Amen.
My name is Irvin Josh Armstrong, son of Irvin and Joyce Armstrong. Irvin Maurice being the son of Roxy. The Price family reunion has been a tradition that I didn't know existed for so long. When I found out that it's been a staple in our family since 1934, it urged me to know more about our overall family history.
And we've been having them ever since. We missed 3 when my mama died. Then we picked back up and started. We have had them every other year since. And I missed it up. So far, so good. And now I was 6 when it started. I am 89 now. I'll be 90 my birthday.
A great picnic. I mean, I couldn't believe all the relatives all the first cousins that I had. At one point, I went through and counted all my Price family first cousins, and it was 54. My first cousins, okay? That's a whole lot of first cousins. A whole lot of names to try to remember. I had a hard time. But we had a blast, playing ball, you know. The first time I saw they cooked a pig, dug a hole in the ground, you know, and roasted that pig all night long. They started having fun doing that like at midnight the night before, and it was all night long, and that pig wasn't ready to be eaten until the next afternoon at 4. But in the meantime, we were having fun at the family picnics. That was my most vivid memory of being with my grandfather. But, you know.
Now, we all know about having fun, but to know the history, we have to start off in the beginning. That does start with Acme Wallace Price.
My grandfather, Acme, was known as a preacher and a teacher. Okay. You know, he had, from what I read and heard about, you know, from all the relatives and even read a little bit, you know, he had a school that started his school started at the log cabin that he built, okay? He had 100 acres, okay? And I think he got this land from his father, James, but he had 100 acres, and on a small portion of that, he had a log cabin that he used at a school and a church. And then later on, he worked with Booker T. Washington, okay, and got a school built. And the school was built in 1921 and went to 1958, okay. And this school was worked with the Mount Pisgah school system, as well as, and he had, you know, kids coming through there, you know, not only his grandkids, but other neighborhood kids coming through the school. And it was a kindergarten through 8th grade school.
Papa Price wasn't just an educator. He was a strong and devoted Christian, and he also installed the preaching and teaching that we still see today.
I want to say on the Price side, my grandfather, He was very educated and very religious. This is what I remember when I was a little girl. He would go to Sunday school. He would be the first one at the church to unlock the door to let everybody else in. He was very religious. And he stayed in the Bible. He read the Bible a lot. And where he taught his children to go to church, be in church. He was a deacon at church. He was one of the best deacons Mount Pisgah ever had. And you didn't hear anything about Papa Price. Papa Price never started a disturbance long as I was in Mount Pisgah. He was very, quiet. He was a quiet person. And he was softly spoken. I just want to say something about the Price.
Yeah.
He was softly spoken. He was a beautiful man. And he raised all his children up in church. He carried them to Sunday school.
Papa Price also installed teaching in his kids.
All of that is true. Went to every one of them.
Went to Price Chapel.
From Bernie's all the way down. Yeah, she started.
Okay.
All of them started out there. When it first started, went up on one-room log school.
How many grades was it?
8, and he taught all of them.
8 grades.
He taught from the primitive to 8.
Okay.
That's what you call a master teacher. They don't know how to be master teachers, man.
All I remember about the school, I was very small. I would say about 4 years old, because I hadn't even started school. And what I remember, my grandfather, Papa Price, was very strict. You couldn't hardly move. He was very strict. But he had a little paddle. And everybody he was teaching, if they got out of order any kind of way, they would get a spanking. Yes. You know the Bible said, train up a child in the way he should go. And when he's old, he will not depart.
He brought up his children to teach.
And then going to school was about half a mile, maybe, I don't know if it was a half a mile, quarter of a mile, maybe. And it was a little red schoolhouse. And I remember even my dad allowed me to help teach the other kids how to read. And I remember doing that. And I remember the switch he had in the corner that reached all the way to the other end. And so he would just take this long switch and touch the kids and turn around. That's all he had to do.
But when it comes back to the root of things, Acme Price was a preacher and a teacher.
So you just heard about him. I heard about him being a preacher and a teacher. Okay, and that was my most memories about him, just knowing that he was a man of God and of education.
And we can even see the preaching and teaching in generations to come.
What I remember about Papa most was, everybody always told me that I would be just like Papa.
And she just like Papa.
And
she got all his ways.
And I worked hard. And they said, one of my father's sisters said, y'all gonna work that child to death. All she's doing is working and taking care of the babies. And so the more they told me that I was gonna be like my grandfather, Acme Price, the more it stuck in my mind, if I have to be like him, if I'm going to be like him, I have to teach. I have to teach.
She got all
and so I think that's one of the major reasons that I graduated from Tennessee State in 1964, was because they always told me I was going to be like him. And I was proud of Papa. Because of Papa, I stayed in education for 48 years. And I really loved every moment of it.
Now we know about Acme Price, but Bessie Fleming installed another piece to our characteristics.
But I never heard say anything about the Flemings when the family reunion. We always talked about the Prices. I just wanted somebody to know what the Flemings did and where the Fleming added to the family. Because without the Fleming side, I don't think we could have done as well as we've done with our thinking and our promoting ourselves and learning to work for ourselves. Dad and Mama taught us to go to church, Sunday school, and all that kind of stuff. But when it come down to do it, James learned how to lay bricks. And he started his company in St. Louis when he went to St. Louis.
Okay, Stick Fleming and his wife Patience. Okay, they had a store in the area of Mount Pisgah Church. Okay, the present location, the current location of Mount Pisgah Church. He had a storefront in that area. Okay, Carrie told me it was in the area. She could tell you exactly where it was, I think. But I just know it's in that area. And they had a store. And the store was doing pretty good. Okay, white folks going by there buying stuff as well as, blacks. And some people get jealous. Okay, and they got jealous. And now here we are. And it's sometime in the 1920s. Okay, sometime in the 1920s, they burned the store down. And when they burned the store down, either one of Stick Fleming's kids or one relative, I'm assuming it might have been a kid, but I'm not sure who it was or what his name was. But there was a 2-year-old that was burned up. Okay, but that did not slow down or stop Stick. He built up another store, and when he built up the second store, not only did it sell food and groceries, okay, he also had a gas station pump, okay? Now, this is in the late 1920s or maybe early 1930s, okay? He had a grocery store with a gas station pump. That's what you have at all gas stations nowadays. Our great-grandfather, Stitt family, was a pioneer in that. Gasoline station and a store, okay? So once again, he's making money, okay? And he's doing well, okay? Once again, some white folks got jealous. We can laugh about it now, but it's part of history. When you tie in our family, with what you read in the history books, it's there. It's there, okay? And that was really interesting to me when I learned this and found this out, and then was able. And I've been trying to find if there were some newspaper articles about this, but I haven't been able to research that enough to see if there's an article about Stitt Fleming's store being burned down.
Yeah, they broke the store up the first time, right? And killed one of his sons. Okay. He rebuilt the store back, right, and he still made more money than a white man did in the grocery.
Or an article about Stitt Fleming being shot to death, one night. According to Carrie, Stitt Fleming was in the bed with his wife, Patience, okay, and it was late at night. They were already in bed, okay, and they heard a familiar voice saying something like, "Nigger, get your ass out of here giving us gas." Something to that effect, okay? And so Patience told him, "Don't go out there, honey. Don't go out there. Hurry up!" So he got on up, went on out there, and they shot him 3 times dead. Now, Patience knew of her relatives, okay? And people often felt that the voice that called him out, she knew who it was. But she did not want to tell anybody who she thought it was because she felt it would cause a riot or more problems or somebody else coming up here. Okay, and she was fearful that some of her relatives or just could get worse. So to her last breath, she never told anybody who she thought it might have been that called her husband out.
And this time, they came and called him out and said he needed some gas. Mom Patience said she knew the voices, but she never did tell who it was. She never did say who it was. Mm-hmm. But they shot him 3 times in the stomach. Okay. That's it. And nobody never did get the stove started back after that. Mm-hmm.
With that entrepreneurial spirit from the Fleming side, this continued with Bessie. She was always able to make that extra money for the family.
Grandma Bessie was a hard-working woman, okay? And because she was not around when she died in 1942, and that's another story as far as my mother and what happened with her. I may have to talk a little bit about that. But from the stories I've heard, especially talking to my dear Aunt Carrie, she's told me a lot. And one of the main things I remember about her saying is that grandmother had a business, okay, where she would milk the cows, she passed and have the milk, she pasteurized the milk, and sold milk and egg to a train station over in Cordova. And I remember when we would come from my father's side of the family to that side, we went through Cordova and went past his train station, okay? And once I heard the stories from Aunt Carrie about her once or twice a week would carry food, dairy products to the train, and I'm not sure if she sold them individually to the passengers or she sold them to like if they have a kitchen on the train or something like that. But she would sell milk and eggs to the train, and she did that 2 or 3 times a week, and that brought in extra change into the household. And
my mama was the one made the money. She had a dairy and she would milk them, and we'd milk the cows in the morning about 4 o'clock. And she would put the milk in the cans and carry and meet the train at Cordova. And she would pick up empty cans and bring them home, and they'd put the milk cans on the train. And she run that dairy, she sold market, she canned food. Now you talking about the woman of Proverbs, read Proverbs. Mm-hmm. She didn't have a spinning wheel, but she worked from sun up to sundown, and sometime after sundown. She made blankets, she made quilts, she made our things we slept in. She made her sheets out of yellow domestic. She was a woman busy all the time from sun up to sundown. And then sometimes 11 and 12 o'clock at night. Now that's just the way she worked.
Knowing a little more about Acme and Bessie and how home life was growing up, when it was time to go to high school, the Price kids would be sent away to boarding school at Woodstock.
And Aunt Carrie was one of the main reasons why they were able to send all their kids to a boarding school. Because this was like in the 1920s. And in the 1920s, we were just 60 years from having our, emancipation. And before 1860, if we were caught reading, we got strung up. Okay, we're shot. Okay, that was a no-no. You had to sneak to try to open up a book and learn anything. Okay, so here's 60 years later. Now you can get up schooling, but you couldn't go to school with white kids. Okay, so you had to have your own black schools. And in having our own black schools, Professor Price had a school that he would teach you, and he had everybody in one classroom, from kindergarten up to the 8th grade. Okay, he's teaching everybody who can get to the school every day. But in order for him to go send the kids to high school, they went to Woodstock, and Woodstock was on the other side of town. Woodstock was like 15 miles north of Memphis, whereas their homeland was like 20 miles east of Memphis. So that 30-mile trip, they couldn't make that every day. So they had to pay for room and board. And the change that Bessie made during the 8 was the difference, from my understanding of the way Aunt Carrie puts it, it was the difference between them being able to send all the kids to high school at Woodstock.
But long as she was living, it was 3 in boarding school. James was the first one in boarding school, then Rox and Amp. And as 3 go off, 3 more. It was always 3 there. And they had to pay for room and board because there wasn't no high schools out there. And they would go over to Memphis, Tennessee and stay at Woodstock in the dormitory. And they paid room and board. And when Mama died, Daddy didn't know how to make that extra money. He had to come get us because he didn't have the money to pay. Major and Jean and I was in high school. He couldn't pay the board. So he had to come get us. And I went to stay with Bernice. And I married young. Major went to the Navy. And from the Navy to St. Louis. And then Margaret, Daddy got able to send Margaret to high school. So she went back to Woodstock. In about 3 years after Mama died, 3 or 4 years after Mama died, she went to Woodstock and she graduated at Woodstock.
Okay, and Woodstock is where my mother met my father. Okay, my father lived just 4 or 5 miles from Woodstock, so he can go there every day. And so his family went to Woodstock, and my mother's parents, my mother's brothers and sisters went to Woodstock, and there was a lot of dating between the Prices and the Armstrongs.
Actually,
Matter of fact, I found a letter from my mother to my father in 1941. Okay, the letter was written in September of 1941. And in the letter, my mother was kind of upset with my father because he didn't write, like he should have, because my father had been in Detroit area for a year or two. When he got out of high school in 39 or 40, he looked for a job, and he finally got a job in Detroit, working at the Packard plant. And so they had been high school sweethearts, okay? And so now they're out of high school, and my mother wanted to hook up with my father, okay? And so when he didn't write enough, then she would get mad, But anyway, I found this letter. And in this letter, she talked about, Elma is doing fine. I was over visiting with your parents, your family, last weekend, and Elma's doing fine, and Dorothy says hello. And I didn't know, I knew about who Aunt Elma was, and I also remembered that Aunt Elma had her oldest son was named Melvin Armstrong. I said, wow. So I looked in my little history stuff, and I got Melvin's address, his birthday down here, and I see that Melvin was born September 28th, 1941. And this letter was dated September 14th, 1941. And in the letter, it said, Elma is doing fine. Just those words. But because Elma was doing fine and was 1921, September, that means she was 9 months pregnant. Mm. Okay? Because 2 weeks later, Melvin was born. Okay? But that was just part of what initiated him Armstrong. Okay? And I'm sure, and I think because there was 2 years difference between my mother and Elma, so they were in high school together. And then my father had a younger brother named Oscar, okay, who was in school. And Oscar and Elma were the same age. And my mother and father were just a year apart, So there might have been some other, how can I say it, boyfriend-girlfriend relationships, okay? But maybe they didn't produce like these two did. But it was just interesting with the 1941 letter and so forth. And my mother could not move to Michigan unless she was getting married. Okay, Bessie said no. My mother wanted to go. Bessie said, nope, you can't go there. If you go there, you got to promise me one thing, you got to get married. And if you go there, you have to send me back your marriage license as soon as you get there. Okay, I got a marriage license. The marriage license was dated March 4th, okay, of 1942. Okay, and then they got married March 16th of 1942. And then the only way she could come, my father went to his sister, and his sister's husband had a female cousin, a relative living in Detroit. And the only way my mother could come up, she had to come and live with Zenobia. Okay? And so she came up and lived with Zenobia until they got married, then they could come there. So, that's the way the story went anyway. She lived with Zenobia until they got married. And so it was, but it was part of that religious upbringing. Okay? As far as no fornication, okay? You have to, if you're going to hook up with somebody, you got to get married. Okay? You got to get married. And so we there may have been other, but nothing as serious as those two, as far as producing any offsprings and getting married. But I'm sure there might have been others just flirting and having fun together. Armstrongs and Prices going way back.
Right.
Going way back.
Now, of course, my grandmother Roxy wasn't the only one who had a love story. My Aunt Bernice had a story of her own.
Aunt Bernice was the first child, okay, and she was born in 1915, and she eloped, okay, she eloped. She had a boyfriend when she was, I guess, I don't know when the courtship started, with 13 or 14, with this guy called Hezekiah Jones. Okay, and Hezekiah was known as a great basketball player in his time, and everybody knew Hezekiah in the area. Hezekiah played basketball, and because of that popularity, everybody knew him. Okay, it was quick, fast, jump, run, shoot. But Acme didn't like him. Acme Sr. did not like him and didn't think that he was good enough for his firstborn, Bernice. Okay? And so he would find them together or see that they're close by, and he'd chase them off. He'd chase them off the property. Okay? And people say that, he got his knack of running through the woods because he was running away from Papa Acme. Acme Sr. That's where he got his skills as far as how to run from the authorities. Okay? And he had a lot of that because Acme Sr. said he would never marry him. I don't want him to have anything to do with my sweet Bernice.
He stole mother from Papa. They taught me from a child, and Papa ran my daddy through the woods almost a half a night trying to catch it. And that's the reason he was called a ghost too, because Papa couldn't catch him. And he had a stashed mother somewhere.
Yeah, James Weeks knows.
He had stashed her.
But Donnie.
And when Papa got so tired he couldn't run him any longer, he went back and got mother. And our cousin, mother's first cousin, took Daddy Pusher and my mama, Bernice, and put them in the car. They just had started cars then. Put them in the car and carried them to Memphis. And my mother and dad stayed in Memphis. We were 3 years in this city.
Where's Memphis?
3 years.
Tell them where's Memphis.
Okay, now you finished it.
But Hezekiah was a determined man. Okay, determined young man. He was 3 years older. He was born in 1912, and Aunt Bernice was born in 1915. So he had developed this plan where he was going to have Bernice in Memphis, Tennessee, okay? And then in Memphis, Tennessee, he was going to get her, and then they were going to go across the Mississippi River and get married. Well, come to find out that Acme found out about it, and was on his way to Memphis to stop them from getting married. But Hezekiah heard that he had found out and heard that he was on his way, so he got Bernice, and they went across the Mississippi, and they got married. Okay, and they got married. So, and then when they came back.
Now, who was this man named Hezekiah Jones? Well, he worked for the Bryant Plantation for 1 year as a sharecropper. Deep down, he knew sharecroppers couldn't win, and so did Calvin Bryant. So he tried to bait him to stay and gave him half the money for the cotton on one day. After that, Hezekiah threw a big party with 50 pounds of fish, cooked a hog, and had 5 gallons of corn whiskey. He made $500 after that party. This success launched him to work for himself and be admired for his entrepreneurial spirit.
Hezekiah Jones was my oldest sister's husband, a man I have admired all my life. Because of the way he maneuvered. Now, he could make money. And I didn't understand what a man like Pusher was like until I got to be a grown woman. I was in my 50s or 60s. And I first thought he was a bad man because the law was always after him. But I found out as I began to mature and realize that he just knew how to make money. He couldn't get a license. But he took care of his family.
Why couldn't he get a license?
The best of everything.
Why couldn't he get a license?
Because he shot
What?
some.
Because black folks didn't get licensed for making whiskey.
They do now.
And he couldn't get a pistol, so.
It's licensed now.
They can get it now, but he couldn't then. Pusha, he could make it, and he made a lot of money. He took care of a lot of folks. He was better than most church folks. Now, I'll be honest, I've seen a lot of folks good, but I ain't seen none would do the stuff Pusha do when it come down to helping other folks. And doing for other folks. And he did it without asking for it back. He didn't look for it back. He didn't want it back. He would just give and give and give. Help, help, help. That was Pusha. And I didn't understand it until I got to be near 60 years old. And I couldn't help but admire the way he lived his life. And the way he took care of his family. And he wasn't a Fleming, but he sure know how to make money.
Making road ghosts.
They call Pusha the Making Road Ghost.
Why they call him Making Road
They
Ghost?
call him Making Road Ghost because he sold whiskey and they tried to catch him so much and he outrun them.
He could never.
And they couldn't catch him. They say every time they catch him, he was slipping their hand like somebody had been greased. Get axe grease. And they named him Making Road Ghost because they said he act like a ghost instead of a real human being. And they just couldn't catch him. And when they did catch him, they let him go home, take a bath, put on clothes and everything.
They didn't catch him.
Before they had him to jail. They respected him. He gave respect and he got respect. They know he wasn't doing nothing wrong. He wasn't making a living for his family.
Now, with some of the Price kids staying in Tennessee, obviously my grandmother Roxy took her talents to Detroit, but you also had a whole crew that ended up in St. Louis.
Ferris left first. Okay, Ferris left first and went to St. Louis. And he went to St. Louis because he had a cousin who had a store. Okay, Granddad Acme had a sister. Her name was Elizabeth, and Elizabeth, had a son named Early D. Johnson. Early D. Johnson had a store in St. Louis, and Ferris left Memphis and came and worked at Early D's store. Okay, James Price came to St. Louis. I believe he worked in Cousin Ely's store as well initially. Okay, he was established there. He had a store. So I think he initially started there, but somehow he got off into doing stuff with his hands, doing construction, painting and I'm not sure what all else, building and so forth like that. So he got started in construction and started doing good. And then Major also joined him in construction, and Ferris also joined him in doing the construction trades business. So the three of them were working together, and then they decided to, now they're having kids, and now their sons are working with them as well. So they became a popular construction company in St. Louis known as the Price Brothers and Sons Construction Company. Okay, so three of the brothers were there in the constructions. Okay, and then Acme later moved to St. Louis, but he didn't want to work with his hands. He wanted to work with his mind, and he became an educator.
Well, I just remember James moving, and then I remember Acme. No one could put up with him. They shifted him around here and there and everywhere. And he always told me, "You see, Loris, I'll never use these hands for hard work. I'm going to use my brain." So that stuck with me. So that's what he did, I guess. He went to college and got it.
Acme was an educator. He went to school, several different schools, and got a master's degree, ended up being principal of different schools, and was just a community organizer and a churchgoer, and became real active in the community. And at one point, he became so active in the community that he ran for mayor. Okay, Acme was not living, I think he was living just outside of St. Louis, and I think called something called Universal Cities. And he ran for mayor for University City, and he didn't win that, but it just showed to the popularity that he had. Okay, Uncle Acme was a funny guy, always wanted to be in the center of attention, you know, demanded it, so to speak, you know. He was a funny guy who was religious and articulate, and just fun to be around. Okay.
I met my husband in Detroit at the church. I remember him coming. I told him, I saw you, that young man I met a couple of weeks ago at the door. And so I know I didn't know he had his eye on me. I was having a youth discussion at the church, and I invited all the young people to come. And some of the parents just dropped the children off. So after we had whatever the discussion was, I can't remember the discussion, but whatever it was, the kids didn't have nobody to take them home. And some of them live on the east side, Detroit. I could walk up to the church. I was, you know, where I lived on LaSalle there. I could just walk straight up to Macedonia. I think that was the name of the church. Mm-hmm. And I walked, but then I was trying to get a way for all the kids to get back home. And so, and I asked him if we'd be able to take some of the kids home. And he did. He was real, you know, kind, took the kids home. But he took everybody else home first. I lived right around the corner. I didn't know what he was going to do. And then I remember getting to know him, and he told me about his job and what kind of working with the air traffic controller. I had no idea. Never met one before. And so then it was getting pretty late, and I was sitting down in the car talking. And I said, oh, my brother-in-law and sister just came home. Would you like to come in and meet them? So he came in and met Roxy and Josh. And I was telling them, you know, he's an interesting job, blah, blah, blah. Okay, a week or so later, I got off from work. Your uncle, Sterling, said, I learned somebody called you. I thought it was Tillis. He was a young man who was in charge of the choir. And so I said, oh, okay. And he'll call you back. Okay. Well, I didn't know, so he decided to, he called me back, I don't know if I want to ride to the bar rehearsal. And so I said, oh, and I knew he was, so I told him, yes, he can give me a ride, because he lived right around the corner, I think on Tuxedo, I believe that's where he lived. And so he came and took me, you know, gave me a ride, I got a ride there and back. And every time, I always had a ride after that. And so that's how I met him.
So how long did you guys, I guess, date before you got married?
Not long.
Okay.
I knew what I wanted. He was kind of shy, wasn't? Don't follow my example, though. Get to know the person, but it worked out for me. Like, I mean, I worked for everybody. After a couple of weeks or so, I was, you know, I knew that was the type of person I would like.
I'm doing real good.
Now, how old are you again?
97.
And you're feeling good?
Oh.
How do you feel?
Don't nothing hurt me. So I just thank the Lord. I can't thank the Lord enough.
That is great, Mom.
Yeah, George.
From the preaching and teaching to the entrepreneurial drives, I not only learned more about the Price family, but I learned more about myself and who I am. Now I know there's more history and more stories out there, but even from what I've recently learned, I'm proud to be a part of the Price family, and I'm striving to continue the great legacy that's already installed.
We are family. I got all my sisters with me. We are family. Get up, everybody, and sing. We are family. I got all my sisters with me. We are family. Get up, everybody. say.